Dame un minuto porque soy muy tímido. Se ve mejor detrás de la cabeza.
So clearly, it can be taught.
Debíamos partir, era la ley, nuestro destino.
Miren chicos, esto lo pueden hacer ustedes.
A mí me encanta que los libros empiecen justo desde la portada.
Tiene como un puntito, está como diciendo, medio gritando.
Llegué ayer por la mañana a Buenos Aires, ciudad a la que he viajado para permitir que la ficción, una vez más, se infiltre en mi biografía.
Ir a la deriva, perderse.
La pregunta es, ¿podemos vivir sin verdades?
Hola a todas y todos, bienvenidos, buenas noches. Estamos en una nueva actividad del Film Online 2020. En este caso, realizaremos una conversación con Nic Pizzolatto, uno de los guionistas norteamericanos más interesantes de la última década. Agradecemos a la Embajada de Estados Unidos y a K&S Films por permitirnos que Nic esté presente en el festival, tanto en esta actividad como en la masterclass que estará dando el próximo viernes 23, y pueden anotarse entrando a nuestra web www.filba.org.ar. Bueno, seguramente conocerán a Nic por ser el guionista de la serie True Detective, pero también es el autor de una novela, Galveston, muy interesante que les recomendamos muchísimo, y ya seguramente hablarán un poco más sobre eso en la entrevista que va a estar realizando Natalia Trzenko, quien es periodista y crítica especializada en cine y TV. Así que sin más, los dejo que comiencen con la conversación. Nic, Natalia, have fun.
Thanks. Hi, Nic. Well, in the last few days, I've been immersing myself again in your world, in your literature and scriptwriter world, and I didn't knew about Galveston before True Detective, and I think maybe that's something that happened to a lot of viewers, that they got to know your work through TV and then kind of changed lanes to the novel. Do you think that?
Definitely. You know, it seemed that way. I mean, it had done okay in America, and it did well in France before True Detective. But I think France was the only place it got much notice before the show. Yeah.
And why do you think that? Why France?
Well, they've always had really good taste when it comes. They've always had really good taste when it comes to American writers. I mean,
you're right. And movies.
Most of the time. But generally, I mean, I think they liked what they liked, the sensibility or characterization, but it's definitely a place, or at least it still was the last time I was there. It's about 5 years ago, maybe, where our authors are, very appreciated, and the citizenry still engages with literature as a viable you know, pastime, as
Right.
as part of the fabric of their lives, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's becoming less and less the case everywhere. So, you know, maybe that. But I was very, very pleased that they liked it, because they, as a nation and as literature critics, have really done a great job throughout our history, my country's history, of appreciating our artists before we do, and sometimes even showing us how to appreciate these artists and why they should be appreciated. I mean, I remember that anecdote about Victor Hugo visiting Melville's grave, and it's this, like, you know, it could be a pauper's grave. Nobody even knows it's there. And, you know, he wrote to somebody, it's really remarkable. They have the greatest English language writer since Shakespeare buried here. And you would think, you would think it was an anonymous grave.
Yeah, it happens with US cinema too. I mean, the French were the ones that thought of a lot of directors as authors. So it's in their nature to discover things that maybe other parts of the world don't find, I don't know, artistic enough, or
maybe it's just the role art plays in their lives. You know, I think our lives, I think our individual lives are pretty unartistic now, in terms of how much we're engaging with ourselves in order to engage art and a creator's work. Beyond this sort of endless grazing field of limitless content that, you know, you can just, well, it narcoticizes you, I think. I mean, I love TV. TV raised me. When I just moved into this house a couple months ago, but I put up good TVs in every room I might be in. And I don't think I mean, I've barely turned those things on. Like, I just can't take it anymore. I don't.
Right.
It's just, I have the image of drowning in garbage.
Yeah.
And
but I think maybe I know exactly what you mean, and the whole news cycle and the whole infotainment, and it's everywhere, and it's narcotizing, as you said. But also I think that fiction in TV kind of, it's maybe replacing somehow the novels in a way as the reflection of our time.
Oh, for sure. But I don't think it's doing that anymore. I think it had that moment. I think its moment to do that was in the early 2000s, close to our present day. I think that's when it happened. The Sopranos, The Wire, Deadwood, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Arrested Development, you know, like all these high-level shows, dramas and comedies, started to replace the more literary effects of cinema, so that cinema was becoming entirely spectacle, and spectacle of, you know, not David Lean or something, but the spectacle of people punching through planets and stuff. And then that sort of serialized content, you know, took over, I think, that idea of settling in with a novel and living in that world for a season. And to be fair to the arts, you know, I don't think Americans ever did that to a huge degree in my lifetime. Before, but they were generally, the ethos was about other things, and over here it seems like new medium then legitimizes the junk medium that came before it. So
Right.
once we had, movies were when they first arrived were considered for kind of dumb people, and smart people read books or they went to plays, and then TV came, and well, TV's for dumb people, and smart people go to the cinema, and then the internet came, and it was TV is for smart people, the internet's for dumb people. And right now, right now we're moving. There's another shift taking place, which is like, in ways, the internet is for dumb people, in that you can use it to search out the truth of what's happening, or you can sort of just sit back and have your emotions and your mind controlled and programmed. But I think the personal content is now being legitimized because of video games, or video games are being more legitimized because of the advent of personal social content.
Yeah.
So I mean, and all of this is really only of passing interest to me. I'm just, I can't help but observe, and I don't like to kid myself about this stuff either. That just what you're doing is the idea that what you're doing isn't going to change, or that there won't be these major upheavals in medium and cultural dissemination and things like that.
But the thing is that all these changes that you talked about, and I absolutely agree with you, are happening so fast, faster than we ever seen. I mean, in the 19th century, novels and literature were the way to reflect the world, wherever that may be. Then, as you said, movies and films and TV. You said in 20 years, TV rise and fall in that way. And
I think so.
And you think you are done with TV? With working on TV?
No. I mean, I have an overall deal with Fox 21 and Disney right now, and I have a couple scripts for a show I created for them. What I'm coming up against is, well, first with this year and everything being so sort of up in the air in terms of studios and programming and stuff, I just don't know. Like, there's a definite part of me that feels like as this was sort of, this project was sort of discussed and fleshed out, it seems now to me to be a little bit of a relic of a former world. But I do have that, and there are, that is the sort of TV side of things for me right now. But I've started kind of being newly prolific in a lot of ways, and almost all of that had to do with I had a lot of things in my life that had to get in order, and that have not been, and it all fell into place this year, and so now I'm actually in a place where I can do things, and while fulfilling my contractual obligations, I've wanted to go back to the novel, but because I also think too, so cinema and TV are not going to be the dominant art form of this century, the way they were the last century. And the novel was not the dominant art form for most of last century. But any of these forms always have life in them. Like there is nothing stopping someone from doing something that makes a large number of people take notice and experience it. But it would have to be a different kind of novel. And I've been working on 3 things that I'm really excited about. It's the only autobiographical thing I've ever written.
Oh.
And it's like a trilogy. And the more I was writing on it, because what I was finding was having passed through or entering the sort of waning days, the end of empire of cinema. It has left me with some general impatience about things I used to love in the novel, or I got rid of almost my entire library, and the books I kept were just, these are the good books that are nice editions and they'll go to my daughter. But my appetite for fiction in all things has gotten very low. The reality I'm presented with is a fiction, and most people are presented with is a fiction. And so I mean, just waiting to get on the call, I've been going through Jung's collected works. This is psychology. This is volume 12, Psychology and Alchemy. And I'm sort of, I'm now thinking I did this as a mental exercise, just from, my opinion, having gone so deep into all his stuff, including the Red Book this year. I think he might be the most significant intellect of the 20th century in terms of his usefulness to the 21st century. I mean, I think, at least in the Western world, I think it's Einstein and him. But Einstein, like Jung, the full ramifications and usefulness of Jung's work is only now kind of being more widely disseminated. Like, people are picking up aspects of Jungian psychology from self-help books and things like that, but also coming to an awareness that this wasn't yes, he was a psychotherapist, but this was an artist. This was, I think of him now as kind of the way I think of William Blake. And so that's been really innovating, but I digressed. What I was finding I had little patience for, that I used to admire about the novel, was the sheer amount of busy work they seem to take. Like, novels I had once, contemporary novels, I should say, I'd once read and enjoyed. I wondered if I hadn't enjoyed them because I was told to, or because I was fetishizing certain craft aspects that I'd been told to fetishize, because I was trying to learn craft, and taking in all these books and taking in instruction or ideas about craft. That was one thing, but I was like, did you love this? Because I opened up on, when I was going through my library, by an author who's won a few major prizes over here, Pulitzer, National Book Award, and I was like, I read the first paragraph and it seemed so contrived, so mannered with the standard toolbox of fiction, the minuscule detail, the allusion to what the real story will be, but we're not going to get there yet. And the sort of clumsiness of these kinds of hooks, I mean, it was something like, it begins with the guy saying, something about how his father burned down their house and did like something, and then went on this stuff with them. But that's not what this story is about. This is, and I just said, who gives a shit? Jesus. And just, had to throw it away. And what I was thinking about was like, well, and the other thing that kind of inspired what I was working on now was when all my life, and when I came to Hollywood and was sort of determined to do it one way, film and TV seemed to me the most important and durable of the artistic mediums I could take part in. And when I turn on that thing behind me, and I don't have cable, it's just all streaming services, but you know, when you wanted to just veg out in front of the television and watch something for an hour, you did the day's work, you know, and for a while, or maybe you want to watch a good movie and you just want to settle into it. Well, now everybody has to first get through the 45 minutes of idly scrolling past things on the screen. And now, to me, nothing could seem less durable or more disposable is a better word, more disposable than making a TV show. Right. And then when I think of, and so then I was trying to think about the novel and how, well, you know, there's ways to do it. And I hadn't done it other than like glimpses and monologues of things, but where we're just getting to the point all the time, just getting to the point. No, every sentence, every word, you're getting to the point. You're not working towards the point. You're not describing a tree for a paragraph because you like the tree, or you know, laying down. Like I was thinking about, I mean, I admire Philip Roth greatly, but and I kept his Library of America editions, but you know, I was flipping through them and I was like, boy, what a great writer. Never going to read any of these again.
No,
because I landed on the scene of An American Pastoral. I don't know if you've read that book.
Yeah.
Where we go into a glove making factory.
Right.
And it takes forever to learn how a glove is made. It's just goddamn forever. And the incidental details are so perfect and lovingly laid down. And, you know, to my mind now, at my age and experience, I'm just like, this is just horseshit. This is just this is
waste of time.
This is filigree. And that passage I remember being very impressed by when the book came out and I read it, and I was in my 20s. And again, I still thought very well written does not belong. And so many of the novels that I would look at, and it's not just ones that aren't slim and minimalist, because I think I think minimalism can do its own version of that very much. And minimalism can look like it's being efficient while it's not saying anything at all.
But in your work, as we saw it, and as to now, there isn't so much of that. I mean, it isn't any of that. I think you have descriptions, of course, but I don't feel that you lose time in your narrative.
Well, thank you. I mean, you know, I tried not to, and I mean, God, that novel was 12 years ago.
Right.
You know, at this
point.
But
I saw the movie.
But thank you very much. Thank you. And there I should have more work. I have not been nearly as prolific as I should have or could have. Right. Like I said, I had all these extraneous circumstances. But now I'm sort of thinking that maybe there's something to coming up with your own medium a little bit, given that the people control the method of distribution, or can so easily now. And so then I began thinking about this trilogy, which would have a visual component as a performance piece that would essentially see me telling a story to a live audience, and that experience would not be disposable. And it wouldn't be permanent, obviously, but its transitoriness might settle into a permanent effect. Like, we all remember that night. Everybody went somewhere that night. And
it happened.
And if it happened, and we're going to think about it, and
Right.
we're feeling something. We're leaving with an emotional resonance. And then if it worked out, then they could be put down as books, and the visual components just inserted at the proper time. But where I'm going with that was they were moving into discursive monologue, and I know enough actors that I was like, oh, I could get, so and so would do this, and we'll do it like a one-man play. And I'll have these 3 video screens, and then I was like, but wait, or I could just do it, and like maybe we'll try that.
Well, you see, it's kind of what happened. I mean, I trying to like the show that Bruce Springsteen did on Broadway.
Oh, right, yeah.
I mean, his story, his music, but it could have been a Broadway musical, with all the someone portraying him. But
it probably will be one day,
Yeah, but as of now,
they'll do a Jersey Boys thing for Bruce Springsteen.
Hopefully not.
I know, but money.
Yeah, but I was thinking that kind of mindset, the one that says I want to tell my story or a story, but with my presence and my voice, my own voice, is kind of a sign of times too. I mean, you control that.
I think you're probably right. And while I've strived to not be controlled by my time and to be influenced by it as little as possible, I'm very sensitive to it. And I'm always sensitive that there is someone else on the receiving end of what I'm doing.
Right.
And just as often as not, it's the same way it will if you're telling somebody a story at a bar. That awareness of audience will become part of your metric for what you leave in and what you leave out, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do think that there is going to be this personal voice thing that we already see, and people with YouTube channels that have way more of an audience than anything on television. And eventually all these streaming services, I mean, I kind of hate to tell people this because I feel like there's a kill the messenger thing in it, but the new content is going away. As the streaming services and as the studios fully become streaming services and they use a subscription model instead of an advertising model, they're going to start understanding the metrics, and in a way they already are, but it's still going to take a little while, that people who are subscribing to them are watching their old stuff. And this content war that Netflix started was phony, because everybody who's not Netflix has 80 years worth of content.
Exactly.
And so, some money man is going to say, well, hold on. These are our 3 most popular shows. The Office, Friends, and The Sopranos.
Exactly.
Wow. Like 3 million people are watching this a month.
Yeah.
How many people watched our biggest news show this year?
Not that many.
And then they'll get that number, and way not that number. And they're going to say, well, how much did we spend on new content this year? And they're going to say, like 500 million. And then the man who wants the stock to go up is going to stop spending $500 million on new content. And they're going to go, well, what the hell are people watching? and they're going to say, well, they're watching their friends' Instagram stories, they're watching these YouTube channels, and oh, okay, so they'll just have this side component to their streaming libraries, which is your friend's Instagram stories, which is this sort of social look at my life thing. And that's not going to cost a dime other than some sort of revenue sharing. And the only movies that'll be in the cinema, at least in America, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but
I don't think you are.
When I'm predicting the future, I never am. And there's going to be each studio is going to make like 5 movies a year. And each of those 5 movies will be a huge tent pole meant to be either a Marvel Star Wars movie or something of the equivalent. And, and then some kids film, but only a couple by Pixar or something. And the streaming services will make stuff for a while, but they're even going to figure out with the kids that the kids grow out of the shows we make. And then there's new young kids come along, and we've got 50 years worth of kids shows that these kids have not seen. And it'll just keep going that way. And then eventually there'll be a snapback to narrative storytelling, but it doesn't mean it's going to emerge on your television. I actually think what's going to happen there is a legitimately excellent writer who is an excellent writer and knows how to imbue a story and characters with the emotional resonance that we want, or I want, from fiction and cinema. That I want to feel. I don't. Your twists and turns aren't going to get me too much. But I would love it if you made me feel.
Right? I mean, right now, I feel that TV is a medium that it's, as you said, evolving and de-involving, and the practice of the trick of cliffhangers. It's dangerous, not only because it's repetitive, but because you fall off the cliff and there's nothing there.
Correct. That's a good way to put it. It's cheap, and you're running off a cliff, and what you're doing is throwing down a board with every step. And if you pause for a moment, the whole thing falls apart because you probably did not have a proper story here. Making it up as you go. It's not like, that's not the proper finished version. However, I mean, how you get places, I think it helps to be very fluid with that. But by the time it goes to somebody else to create that circuit of transmission and reception, I don't think it should be like, nope, I didn't correct a thing, just went through. The logical inconsistencies, people won't remember that.
And people do remember. And people do remember.
Of course they do, especially in this age, because they can just go back and look at it. It's not like it's lost in the fog of time.
Right.
And like one thing I've been doing, I've never done this before. So I've been writing with these really nice pens on this really nice paper. But I mean, like, I'll write on cocktail napkins, I'll write on my phone, like, I don't care. And I've always thought that was good. That if you, like an athlete, if you get too tied down to a particular pair of socks, you're going to have real problems when those socks aren't around. But I was doing that because the more autobiographical thing I was doing, I mean, which also touches on space-time and quantum potentialities and Jungian psychological architecture and blah, blah, blah. But speaking about that urge towards something non-disposable, this was the only way I was writing this, I said, and I wasn't putting down a sentence until I knew exactly what that sentence was. So that I sort of, and I never, I'm like, oh, because I usually feel like that's the most horrible part of writing. Like, I like the part where I have a draft of something and then I'm like, okay, I have my block of marble now. Now I can sculpt it into the statue that's inside of it. And then it's going to show me what that statue is. But because it was my story, and it was, and the people involved were so important to me that I just felt the urge to like, no, write this as if you got to carve it in stone. And each sentence is carved in stone, and you're not like, no scratch outs. If you scratch out, you got to start a whole new book, punk, and copy down everything you wrote. So like weird things like that. Or, I mean, this kind of came out of nowhere, but I started writing 2 podcasts that are very much comedies. I mean, I don't have a deal for them or anything because I was doing it at first for my own pleasure, because I love comedy and I love to laugh. And I mean, you might not know that from my work, but I like this, the sort of box I had been in, I began to feel like, well, you're not in the box anymore, and podcasts don't cost anything, and no one can tell you what to do. And it's about, and so like, these were amusing me too. And it is hysterical, and I'm pretty sure I can get one of my actor friends to be like, hey, you want to come make a podcast? We'll record it for $5,000 and sell it to Spotify if we like it, or we'll just keep it for ourselves. I don't know. But I was really enjoying that. And during the first month of the pandemic, I was being very productive, and I found a novel I forgot I wrote, which was, I wrote it after Galveston, right before I came to Hollywood. Right. And then I was just busy, and I didn't think about it. And it wasn't the kind of work that was lived in my heart or anything. Like, I've got to go back to that. But I revised it, and I thought, that's pretty good. I like this. But it's not, but I was like, but is this worth making a book out of? I don't think it is. No. And so I don't, you don't have to do that. I do feel like I've rambled quite a lot to you, and I want to give you a chance to ask your question.
But I like it.
Not your mind.
I mean, you made me think about a lot of things, and my main line of work is TV, and I write a lot about TV and movies. And what you said about the streaming services and the way that people are using them is exactly what I was trying to write in this whole time of pandemic, because people are craving for content, but the content that they are craving are things of the past, like, I don't know,
well,
Cobra Kai.
I think it actually speaks to quality, though. I do not think that's empty nostalgia. I think it's quality.
I think it's a mix, because the most watched show in Netflix right now around the world, according to them, is Cobra Kai.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah. Well, I watched. I have an interesting kind of experience with that show, because I didn't know it. No, I never had anything to do with it. I just didn't know it existed. And last year, like, I found it on YouTube, and I was like, oh, that's the same actors. And I started watching it, and I was like live texting to one of my oldest friends. I was like, Cobra Kai is glorious. And, it turns out that Daniel Russo was not the hero. He was this dirtbag from New Jersey who showed up in town and took this guy's girlfriend and blah, blah, blah. And this guy, Johnny, so traumatized by his sensei. And I loved him being this kind of sort of trapped in the 80s thing.
Yeah, lost in time.
But I liked that a lot. And I was like, wow. So this is a Gen X midlife crisis show. That's not bad. That's really cool. And then it devolved. But so that show, which was a pretty good show, the kind of pop culture midlife crisis.
Right.
But it kept alternating with these goofy teenage stories about, right? And then it just evolved into that. So I don't know, but I knew most people hadn't seen it because I was trying to tell people, I was like, yeah. If you see teenagers and Johnny Lawrence isn't in the scene, just fast forward through it. And Daniel Russo's not interesting. I was like, well, I guess, was Ralph Macchio always this bad? Because he is not acting worth a damn. But no. But was the guy playing Johnny Lawrence, was he always this good? Or maybe it's something about those California pretty boy looks, like looking tired, having lines. So it was almost like that actor William Zabka, right? Time had given him character that he didn't have when he was younger, and Macchio, it hasn't given character. I don't really know what's going on. I was like, oh my God, he's a used car salesman. Like that's all you got to know about his morality. I think it's a great idea, making him a car salesman, because it's like the stereotypical bullshit artist. And kind of what you do if if you're not exceptional, but you know enough to make a living, and your preferred way of making a living is getting people to buy things that you're convincing them they need, but are overpriced, and while they will give them transportation, it's not going to do all these other things you're associating with it.
And you said this idea that sometimes fiction trace with it too, that you're lying and the other person knows you're lying, but we all play the game. And
I mean, there's two things maybe there, so I understand what you mean. The one is that, well, this didn't happen. This is fiction. But the honesty there is, I'm saying this is fiction, and we're like, okay, well, that's part of the glory of this art, is that I'm going to experience other consciousnesses, maybe just one, maybe the authors, or maybe several if the characters are done well enough, more intimately, and in a way that expands me as a person more than the day-to-day of my life. And most of us have communities, good, but we're going to see the same people all the time, and it can be easy to become lazy and stop just lazy in this, not narcissistic, just in the sense that we forget at times, especially maybe with the people we're most intimate with, just how much there is going on inside any given human being. I mean, there's this welter of complexes and past and sort of triggers that we're so unconscious of. I forgot to finish a thought real quick. I was telling you, I think the next thing will be, and then I just rambled off. I think a really good writer will imbue with emotional resonance a really good video game. I don't play video games because who has the time? But we have an Oculus. My daughter plays, and I've put it on before, and I know many people consider video games art, and they are.
Yeah.
And I know gamers who, you know, say like, oh no, when you get to the end of this game, like I'm just crying. And so, but they have not done that yet for people who aren't gamers. And somebody is going to do that. And it's only going to take one where, like a piece of great cinema or great literature, you know, as it's going, you're just fully in it. And when it's over, you're changed in some way. And so I imagine as VR keeps exponentially getting better and better and more free, requiring less equipment, you know, you'll have an epic video game where you're the hero and somehow you are living a movie and making all the you're not just getting a, you know, well, do you take path A or path B? Which is like, I thought that was the dumbest thing in the world. I understand why you might have to try it, but that Netflix thing where we're going to give you a choose your own story, because I'm like, well, no, that's the worst part of the medium mixed with the best part of video games, which is agency. But, well, you don't have any agency here, really. You're just choosing between two paths. And there's also that thing where there's a way to fight this that is foolproof, but for the most part, we probably shouldn't, because there aren't enough people who could. This idea that the audience should have agency over the story. The idea that you should read my comments every week so you know what to adjust in the story you have compelled me to be unable to turn off. And, you know, that's ridiculous. Like, art isn't democratic. It's not. It's about the most authoritarian thing. It's not the most I can imagine, but it's definitely the most authoritarian thing I do, because no, we're not taking votes. And I'm sorry to tell you, that's not how TV works. We're not making them week to week. So like, these are all in the can before, but the reason we shouldn't, like, and the way you fight that actually is by, I guess, sort of ravishing the audience. You take them away. They are in your control, and they want to be in your control, and they may not like everything, but, well, that's part of it. If these things were given over to committees, I mean, that's why I've never used a writer's room, really. It's just, if it saved me time, I would. But having, like, constantly explaining intention and correction and vision, I'm just like, the easiest way to explain it for me is to just write it down. It's mostly white space, you know. It's not like you're asking for a novel every month. Like, this is it's like a plot poem or something.
I think it got, at some point, it got confused, the idea of passivity, audience passivity, with audience input. And there is a point between that is audience being active, but in their interpretations of the work, not influence the work. You know what I mean?
I absolutely agree. And yes, that's what it's there for. That's the use of ambiguity. I think I think where that turns into problems for certain audience members is when they're interpreting things that the work is in no way offering an interpretation of, to where their experience then of watching a film or a show or anything is that they're writing fan fiction about it, essentially, in their head. And it's like, well, wait a minute, there's a difference between interpreting and hijacking, you know?
Exactly.
Like, you're not interpreting at this point because there's nothing there that tells you that is a viable interpretation.
Yeah, and the feeling,
and you know,
yeah, the feelings are yours, but not the material.
Right, absolutely, and yeah, and for what it's worth, you were made to have these feelings. That is really hard to do. That's really hard to do. And I feel like the proliferation of content has sort of reiterated how hard that is to do. That like, oh yes, you can make a TV show. It can look like a TV show. It can look great. It can have famous actors we recognize. And it's not doing that thing.
Right, right.
It has all the signifiers of something artistic and significant, but its effect is not the effect of something significant.
Right. When you talk about the great future or present, I don't know, writer that could take the next step, do you have someone in mind in terms of models? I mean, in TV or in literature that did that before?
Well, you know, I guess the mediums that I've most worked in were so established, you know, that they seemed like those were, as cultural mediums, those were things I was born into, that were already respected. American TV, not so much when I was a kid, but there was enough good TV from other places that
British TV.
And then you know, you can't even say The Sopranos, because The Sopranos was the beginning of killing the movies for in terms of characterization and nuance, I think, and involvement with a deep story. But you know, we already had great comedies before that, and we had some really good shows within the boundaries of network TV, which were pretty strict. But you know, David Milch still managed NYPD Blue, and things happened. I guess I don't know. In the 80s, there was one comic book writer who made everyone stand up and like the New York Times and stuff and say, hey, comic books aren't just for kids. And then that led to this big wave of everyone writing like darker and grittier comic books. And then I left. I mean, and I left them at that point. I think I was like 15, and just left them. But the one guy in the 80s that did that, to my mind, I mean, nobody's done it since. He was the one, but he legitimized the format for adults. And they couldn't do it since because they were, and this happens in Hollywood constantly, they were imitating the trappings of his work or some of the material aspects of his work, the atmosphere, right? Without understanding that is not why this is successful. That's a component of its being, but this is successful because it makes people who read comic books feel this way, but more pointedly, it makes people who do not read comic books feel this way. They feel the way they feel when they have seen a very good movie or read a very good book. And so that guy, I mean, as near as I could tell from the cursory knowledge I still have about that medium, it just looked like people were copying his trappings. Like, well,
I was thinking about
Alan Moore is serious. He writes art, you know, it's Alan Moore. And I was like, okay, has there been another comic writer since Alan Moore? I'm sure people have written good comics. I know they have. I know. But do they hit grown adults who don't read comic books that way?
Right.
And are they like, are they, I mean, I remember those things being efficient storytelling, powerful, like, you know, scene to scene, like they were just so many light years ahead of anything else. And he wasn't splitting the atom. He was bringing a couple techniques, you know, from literature and cinema. And like, hey, why don't we stop having clouds that say what somebody is thinking all the time? Let's just get rid of those. And we'll just show people doing, like in the movies. And
actions,
then, like, yeah, like that helps. Like suddenly this seems less juvenile, just that one thing. And yeah.
Right. I think you mentioned David Milch, and I'm fortunate enough that I got to interview him years ago because of Luck, the HBO TV show that, you know, didn't end well, or didn't end actually. And I remember that we were in a room, you know how the junkets work, and not many people, not many journalists, and him and the handlers, but he was there and he told us the story of the show, but essentially he told us his story, or a piece of his story, and we all were enthralled by it. And the silence, I never ever experienced in my 20 years working that kind of silence, that kind of, I don't know if it was reverence, but we felt it. We felt what he told us, and I think that's what you're referring to. I think
yeah, like well, obviously it's his way with the story. You know, I think you could have met another creator who had that exact story, and you would have all been like, okay, thanks very much, and left. But yeah, I would like to think the silence was because the resonance of your emotion demanded silence in that moment.
Yeah.
You needed to be quiet and feel what you were feeling, and think about what you were feeling. And yeah, I have such great love and affection for that man, and I'm really glad you got to meet him.
And also going to the start of the conversation, I was thinking about that, because when you said telling my own story now, some autobiographical journey, I felt that with him too, that his work was autobiographical in a sense, and that what he put out there wasn't your standard writer's room, or your standard breaking of a scene, you know, all the trappings of making a TV show. It was something else. And
oh yeah, and I mean, look, I think anything I've written about, I'm writing about emotions that are autobiographical. It's just the particulars and the story and scenario are not, and the characters are. Like nobody's me in any of my stories.
Yeah.
I mean, and Dave's story is compelling on its own. I mean, it is. It's a good story.
Yeah, I was thinking also about the what you said about the changes that time may make in a phase in a life. And do you think it's been this a couple of weeks rewatching your shows and reading your novel and watching the adaptation, the movie adaptation of Galveston? Do you think that time is a theme in your work? I know it's a really abstract idea.
No, I mean, I don't think about themes. But did you hear what David Milch's daughter said about his work? It was in the New Yorker about a year ago. I just thought that was a lovely way to put it. She said, my father writes novels that are filmed as stage plays and viewed as TV shows.
Right.
Because you can find from Sipowicz on NYPD Blue to the dichotomy between Swearingen and Bullock in Deadwood to the gambling addicts in
Right.
Right. I was really sorry that didn't get to keep going forward, because I wasn't enjoying the crime story aspect of it very much. I like Dustin Hoffman out of prison, all right, but we're going to open a casino and people get killed, and that to me was nowhere near as compelling as those 5 degenerate gamblers figuring out sort of how to make life. And well, we did it. We had the big win. What now? Oh, none of us know how to live. We don't even know how to express affection for one another. And that was very, very, like, horses in stables, men in hotel rooms. There was this beautiful thing happening there.
Right. Yeah, and the idea of men that don't know how to live, how to exist in the world, it's present in your work too, and is. I was wondering how you managed to adapt Galveston to a screenplay, and why didn't you? Did you use another name for the screenplay?
Oh, sure, I'll tell you. Yeah. Well, so Galveston was technically the first script writing job I had. I got the bare minimum for it. It's like somebody optioned the book, and that was the first time I got to talk to Hollywood agents. And I said, well, how do I get to adapt this? And come to think of it, how do I get into TV? And come to think of it, how do I get to be a showrunner? I think that'd be a really good job for me. And they're like, have you ever written scripts? And I said, no. And they go, well, you need to write scripts. And so a month later, I gave them 6 TV scripts. But the way I wrote Galveston was pretty easy. I was like, oh, cool. I don't have to do anything other than replace the voiceover narration with visuals that convey, for me, at least the sense of the emotion happening in the piece. And then it was acquired by another producer than the one I wrote it for. And he hired Melanie Laurent, who nothing against her anyway, but I wondered what was happening with the choice, but that's okay. Doesn't matter. Anybody can, some of my favorite depictions of America and it seemed most true to me have come from artists who aren't here. I thought Ang Lee got the South exactly right in Ride with the Devil, and in a way I probably would not have. But I was never spoken to at all, which that's fine. I don't have any ego about this stuff, and I don't care about the movie because it doesn't change my novel. My novel stands right there. The movie's its own thing. There's never been a novel that was good that the novel suffered because the movie was bad. I don't think anybody was like, oh, that movie was shit. Why do people like that book? We've been idiots for liking this book, and so then I was never spoken to, never just filmed it, never talked to me. And I was shown a cut, and it wasn't an early cut. And nothing worked about it at all. There was a little bit, there was some authentic, because they're both very good actors, I thought there was some authentic emotion between Ben
Foster
and Elle Fanning. But everything it was surrounded by was seemed to me mismanaged to a degree that the effects that were supposed to exist within this story do not exist. Like you're not threading the old man story through it. So without that context, this just kind of becomes a pseudo crime novel that kind of lacks an incident after the first act. And then cinema choices didn't make sense to me. I asked the producer, I was like, why are they in a car? I mean, I'm just wondering why didn't he have his big pickup truck? And he said that the director couldn't figure out how to shoot around the pickup truck. And I was like, what? It's easier to shoot around than a car. It has a big bed in the back. And then there was scene after scene I saw where it was very clear to me that the actors did not know what they were doing in the sense of why saying what they were saying. And that's not the actor's fault ever.
No.
I don't think movies are ever bad because of the actor. If an actor gives what seems to be a bad performance, you don't know that's a bad performance. You don't know what that was edited from. There is every likelihood that actor was making a different story than what ended up on the screen. And I have sympathy for actors in that way, because I can't think of an artist who has less control over how their work is presented than a film or TV actor. So, the actor's medium is really the theater, probably, as far as them being able to control what is happening and how the audience receives it. But so I couldn't believe it the first cut, and then and he asked for notes, because I have traditionally been really good about this isn't what it's supposed to be. Okay, let's and then in editing, let me rewrite this thing a last time with what we have and find what can still work in it. And so I kind of gave some notes toward that. And with so many of them, it was, we don't have it. Like, even to the degree of, you don't have a coverage angle on that other character for when he says that line. And he's like, no, we don't. I was like, well, how you were there? Why didn't you just pick it up? You guys use 2 cameras? Then where was the other camera in this scene? And I think they're not used to an writer being able to I know how this is done, and it's not brain science. It really isn't. In fact, the first time I was on a set, which was for The Killing, I spent the first day walking around asking every single person what they do. Because I wanted to know, and then I was educating myself, and fascinating people, fascinating jobs, and every one of them I know I can't do. Like, those guys are electricians. I don't know anything about that. I don't have time to learn new tricks. And the focus puller, he's doing some kind of Zen reaction to light that I don't understand. The camera guys, they're scientists. I mean, you can have directors that think they're camera guys, but they're not the good scientists, unless it's the Coen brothers or something. But and I was just going around. I was like, wow, I can't do that person's job. I can't. Like, this is incredible. Oh, but that person, the director, almost anyone can do this job. Almost anyone. It's just going to matter how good you are with artists or not, because people don't even understand in the wider culture that most of what they think the director is doing, that is the cinematographer doing that. That's the director of photography.
And the editor.
Yeah, and the editor. If, and that depends on how, I'm a pretty exacting editor, like season 1, because I stayed in California and I didn't want to go to New York. I edited that whole show with 2 monitors. I don't run an Avid or anything like that. I knew every shot we had because I was there. I knew what we had. And I time coded every shot. I would just send back these 10-page, 12-page documents that were literally 0 seconds to 3 seconds, this. 4 seconds to this, this. Like this piece of coverage, this piece of coverage, this piece of coverage. And then sometimes, I mean, I think they're rarer and rarer in the sense that like you don't have book editors like this anymore.
No.
In America. They used to be, but the book editor who would take a book that he or she saw some real authentic power in, but it just didn't work, and they would go in and really edit that thing and really shape it. That doesn't exist here anymore. There's no such thing. There's no such thing, and I think the film editors and the kind of editor we mean is they're usually still in film because they've been doing it a long time, because the younger ones cannot do this. Where an editor, whatever the director's done, the editor can sit there with the script, see what we've got, and make the best approximation of what we have on the page, because ostensibly that is why everybody's here. Everybody didn't say, this isn't a very good script, and they're not paying me a ton. I mean, compared to some other things, but let's just do it, and maybe by some magical alchemy, it'll be better than this terrible script. In fact, by the time people are willing to put up tens of millions of dollars for something, I believe the script is usually pretty good. It doesn't mean it's the top tier, but it's pretty good. And then you have a movie that makes no sense from moment to moment. And you just know that, oh, okay, the person in charge isn't a storyteller. That's it. That's literally it. They were saying, but look at this shot. Isn't this shot pretty? Or isn't this sexy? And it's like, well,
In conclusion, you're not thinking about directing in movies, I mean, or
I am, but it's like the same way when I talk about those 3 narratives being books. It's like, but it's going to be something different. It's not going to be like, yes. I mean, I've been offered things, and I'm just lucky enough to where I don't need to do things for money. And everybody is taken care of that I need to take care of. I don't need a lot. And I've just been like, but I don't want to, like, why would I don't really want to go through that process. Like, this isn't worth going through that process. I could put up a YouTube video or something, or I could just put down my own money and we'll just do something. But I have a couple movies that I have thought about and have sat in rough outline, and I do believe in the film. I think, unlike a TV show, a film can still be perfect, the way a short story can be perfect. But the novel, once it passes a certain size, can't be perfect, because things that are big can't be. And that's good. That's part of what is good about a big novel is it seems to have the kind of hurly-burly sensory effluvia of real life, but the way a short story can just be diamond perfect. It's just perfect, and its effect is perfect. It did exactly what it wanted to do, and that's it. And then it got off the stage, and the film I can still do that. It's just, I don't know how much of the audience in my country, at least, is still able to actually receive the effects of a great film like that. Although, I can't put that on the audience. That's the artist's fault. That's the artist. Right. Your audience is the audience of your time, and if you're not good enough to capture and hold their attention and make them feel like it was worth their time, that's on you. That's your problem. And you don't deserve to have success.
Yeah, and at the same time, there are global audiences that are different, very different from US audiences, and that appreciate the work that comes from the US in a much different way. And I think that's why your shows and the novel connected around the world more than maybe in the US.
Thank you.
Because that kind of, I don't know, pathos or introspection and
thank you.
Search for something. It's something that at least here in Argentina we know a lot about. And what you're talking earlier about young, we are the country that has more psychoanalysts for in public demographically, I mean.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. More than New York as a country, I mean.
Really generous. And thank you. And it's nice. It's such a gift if somebody reminds me of that or makes me believe it, because you don't see too much of that on the ground here. And the nature of our media, right, is for a long time, but it's really been terrible the last 10 years, is so adversarial, no matter what. Like, how dare you do something? Or they actually don't care if you did something unless it's successful.
Right.
And they'd like to come out and decide if you deserve your success. And then here, because of the terrible education that's proliferated through our universities for the last 40 some odd years, I mean, we now have a generation of a commentary class that knows nothing about how to encounter art. Like they do not know what my freshman writing students knew when I taught. They believe that when you, I mean, it's a complete, it's just that they have internalized deconstructionist critical theory that has permeated the humanities departments and really ruined the minds of a shit ton of my countrymen, because they honestly believe that, they don't believe in an author, and unless they want to use that author's work to psychoanalyze them, which is always a bad idea and makes the person doing it look small, I think. But they really think it's simply a collection of signifiers, which needs to agree with the ideologies with which I have been programmed with. And the problem with that is all ideologies are binary, like politics in this country. And so there is no more stupid or reductive way to encounter the human condition, I think, than politics. Politics is fucking stupid. Especially in this country, because not at this moment, but throughout my lifetime, you are being given a choice between two choices that are exactly the same. And you're being programmed into getting so emotional about these things that are practically the same. And then every generation, because this is such a tolerant and guilty country, we get assailed by barbarians, and they're the dumbest of our youth, led by the dumbest of our contemporaries. I cannot think of what could be more out of touch than promoting a 160-year-old political philosophy that has created carnage and hell on earth in its every incarnation. Like, really? Do you think Karl Marx is smart? Do you think nobody has nobody's looked into that to see if it works? You know, Marx was fucking stupid. Marx was wrong about literally everything he said would happen. Everything.
Yeah.
He's not an intelligence worth noting. He is a persuasive writer. That's it. He's a declarative writer. So when he opens with the history of the world is the history of class struggle, period. It's not really going to go on to prove that, because that would take the rest of the book. But it's a declarative sentence. It swaggers its way into the reader's head, and it sounds possibly true. It sounds possibly true, but it's an aphorism, really, and all aphorisms are only half true, right? So where I'm going with this is it's a general. What I see is those that are meant to be engaging serious art have no idea how to do it, because they believe the only purpose for expression is political ideology. And the people who don't know that are either miseducated or so privileged they never have to consider it. And that's the thing, is once you look at human life and human beings as anything other than mass categories, it requires far too much nuance to get anywhere useful. You will not get anywhere useful if you assume anyone who disagrees with you have essentially the motives of an evil person. That there are just statistically not that many evil people in the world, and every time, and God knows, I mean, Argentina knows far more about this than I do, but nobody wants those worlds. What happens is people want to change, and then the radical elements establish a bureaucracy, and you can't get rid of a bureaucracy. Then you're done.
No.
I mean, the Russian people didn't want communism. The Bolsheviks did. The Bolsheviks were the radical fringe. But once the revolution happened, they're in charge.
Well, you know, the only thing that I can say that it's art is the opposite of bureaucracy, hopefully. So let's keep on that road. And thank you
eventually,
very much.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really nice talking to you.
I've been lonely because, you know, we're kind of locked up. So I didn't mean to talk you off. It was nice to talk to somebody, though. Thank you.
Great. You too. Thank you. Bye.
Enjoy the festival. Bye-bye.